David.
You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process, regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. To read the full notice for your rights and protections, go to www.boston.org/MPO_NON_DISCRIMINATION. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation if you have one. After roll call, board members may mute and unmute themselves. Always remain muted unless actively speaking. To participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function. Find this by clicking either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with a raise hand button at the bottom, or the reactions button in the toolbar. The chair will then call on participants. If you are on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. If you have any technical difficulties, please contact Betsy Harvey via the chat or at HARVEY@ctps.org, or call her at 857-702-3701. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, please contact Betsy Harvey of the MPO staff at EHARVEY@ctps.org or at 857-702-3701. First item on the agenda is introductions. I'm David Moeller. I represent Secretary Gina Fiandaca here. Jonathan, please call the roll.
Will do. Mass DOT C2.
John Bouchard, representing Highway Administrator Jonathan Gulliver, present.
Thank you. Mass DOT Highway Division.
John Romano here.
Thank you. MBTA. I think I saw Allie. Okay, I'll come back to the,
Hi there, this is Laura Gilmore. I think Allie was officially going to represent us today, though.
Sorry, it wasn't letting me mute myself. Yeah, good morning. This is Allie Clayman representing Interim General Manager Jeff Gonville and the MBTA.
Okay, thank you. Massachusetts Port Authority.
Hi, this is Sarah Lee for Massport.
Thank you. MAPC Vice Chair.
Not seeing Eric yet.
Okay. MBTA Advisory Board. Oh, Amira, we see you can unmute yourself, but we're not hearing you. So I will come back to you. Okay. Regional Transportation Advisory Council.
Leonard Higgins, Advisory Council here. Thank you.
Thank you. City of Boston, BTD. Okay. City of Boston, BPDA.
Jim Fitzgerald with BPDA representing Mayor Wu in the City of Boston.
Thank you. At-large City of Everett.
Good morning, Jay Monty, representing Mayor DeMaria in the City of Everett.
Thank you. At-large City of Newton.
Good morning, David Kozis, representing Mayor Ruth Ann Fuller in the City of Newton.
Thank you. At-large Town of Arlington.
Not seeing Claire Richter.
Okay. At-large Town of Brookline.
Heather Hamilton for the Town of Brookline.
Thank you. Intercore Committee, City of Somerville.
Good morning, Tom Bent, City of Somerville, representing Mayor Katiana Ballantyne in the Inner Core.
Thank you. Minuteman Advisory Group on Interlocal Coordination, Town of Acton.
Austin Sagano, Town of Acton, representing Magic Subregion.
Thank you. Metro West Regional Collaborative, City of Framingham.
Not seeing Dennis yet.
Okay. North Shore Task Force, City of Beverly, we already received word that Darlene Wynn will not be here today. North Suburban Planning Council, Town of Burlington.
Not seeing Melissa.
Okay. South Shore Coalition, Town of Hull.
Jen Constable, Hull for the South Shore Coalition.
Thank you. Southwest Advisory Planning Committee, Town of Medway.
I do not see Peter yet.
Okay. And Three Rivers Interlocal Council, Town of Norwood, Neponset River Regional Chamber.
Good morning, Tom O'Rourke, representing the town of Norwood in the Trick sub-region. And also just to let you know, I do have to leave at 10:30 today, and I'm not sure Steve Olenoff is here.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Let me just go back quickly. Is anybody else here from MAPC? I just remembered, I don't think Eric will be here today. Okay. Let me go to our ex officio members, Federal Highway Administration.
Good morning, Cassie Ostrander, Federal Highway.
Thank you. And Federal Transit Administration.
FTA.
Thank you, Leah. And I'll just go back real quickly. City of Boston, BTD. I think I see Bill Conroy needs to be unmuted, Aaron. William Conroy.
Bill Conroy, representing the city of Boston, and Mayor Wu.
Great, thank you. That calls the roll, Mr. Chair.
You going back to Amira Patterson?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, Amira MBTA Advisory Board. Thank you, David.
Yes, good morning. Amira Patterson representing the MBTA Advisory Board and Brian Kane.
Thank you. That calls the roll, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the Treasury report. I don't have one, so we can go directly to Tegan's report. Tegan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I only have a few quick items today, but first, before I start, I just wanted to thank everybody for your time and commitment in attending MPO meetings 3 weeks in a row. I know it's a lot, and we really appreciate your commitment to this work. And I also want to thank staff who spend a lot of time preparing for these meetings, especially when they're happening back to back like this. If we could go to the next slide, please. So like I said, I only have a few updates today. In terms of the long-range transportation plan, which I've been giving you regular updates about. First, I just wanted to thank those who were also able to attend the workshop last week to discuss the MPO's investment programs. It was a really robust and interesting conversation, and I enjoyed participating in it. Today, the only update is actually really that we have an agenda item today about the policies for including projects in the long-range plan. So we'll actually talk about that today during the meeting. And then also we had mentioned that the draft municipal and sub-municipal population, household, and employment projections would be released to municipalities. Those were sent by MAPC staff on January 25th, which I believe was yesterday. And again, they have asked for feedback by February 10th of this year. So hopefully you have seen those, and if not, you can reach out to MAPC with any questions. And then also we still have our UPWP survey about study ideas, gathering study ideas from anyone out there, members of the public, board members, anybody who'd like to submit an idea. And again, as a reminder, there are multiple links in that survey to support helping folks develop any of your ideas into something that can be submitted through the survey. So that survey will close on February 15th. Thank you, Erin, for posting the link. And then we can go to the next slide, please. I think there's just some posting of links in the chat. There we go. So today's agenda, we have one action item, which is to vote on a work scope. That work scope is called the Learning from Roadway Pricing Experiences. So I look forward to that conversation. And then we'll have a number of presentations. The first one being from our federal partners, Federal Highway Administration and Federal Transit Administration to summarize the 2022 certification review for the Boston Region MPO, the recommendations and other items in that report. And then we'll also have Stella Jordan present on the public engagement activities of the federal fiscal year 22, the prior federal fiscal year. As I mentioned, we'll have a long-range transportation plan topic around programming policies. And then finally, we'll have a presentation on some work about parking policy and trip generation, a study that Rose McCarron will talk about. And then next slide. Just a reminder, the next meeting will be next week, February 2nd at 10 a.m. We do expect to have one action item, probably around the roadway safety performance targets. And we also expect to have several presentations, and one of them being something that has come out of the A&F committee work on the operations plan to talk about a proposal for a new committee that might help support some of the TIP work that the board does, among other items. With that, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Tegan? Seeing none. Next item on the agenda is public comments. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment at this time? If so, please raise your hand. Seeing none, if you want to comment during the meeting, raise your hand and we will call on you. Could somebody mute if that's you causing the background noise, please? Oh, somebody from the public, Dan, you have a comment you'd like to make? Please state your name for the record.
Yes, my name is Dan Jaffe. I live in Charlestown, and we just got word yesterday of the Rutherford Ave redesign being delayed still again. And I'm very concerned with some of the direction that this is likely heading towards. And this community as a whole, I don't think can handle a 3-lane affair bidirectionally along Rutherford with the inclusion of, I perceive, as the Silver Line. The community already struggles with regional traffic through us at a great cost to our own ability to get in and out of our community. We are functionally an island, and the only means of egress on and off our little island is across Rutherford Ave, either injecting into it or crossing it. And with any additional change of a 2-lane traffic corridor each direction, which is what we had designed in 2019 as being the optimum way of supporting the traffic. Now, that was before COVID. Granted, COVID changed things, but for future growth, we're going to have some serious issues. So we need that 2019 design as described, because we need to break away some of the traffic flow, the regional traffic flow underneath us through the 2 underneath underpasses, both at Sullivan Square and at Austin Street. We cannot survive getting 100% of the through traffic from Everett as it stands now. So you guys have to come up with a better solution. I have one. I don't want to drop that bomb because it would be harmful to Everett. And that is the only thing that I can come up with is a toll solution for Everett pathway. And that's not the right way to go. We don't want to create injustice onto the Everett, but you have to come up with a better idea. I've come up with other ideas that would be better suited for the community as a whole. I don't see any of those actions taking place here. And I see little feelers there and there, but that's not what we need. We need better solutions to get us in and out, as well as getting the regional traffic through us. Now, don't get confused here. Personal transit will still exist, whether it be fossil fuel or EVs. It makes no difference. The volume of traffic is not going to physically change, and we cannot do a cold turkey maneuver, which is where you're heading towards. Cold turkey will kill us. It'll also kill Boston as a whole. You need to gradually get there. And the only way to do it gradually is, first of all, solve our problem first. Our problem is our own internal transit solutions to reduce our need to cross or to integrate into that Rutherford traffic. We have to solve that first. That is the first action item. Before you do anything more on Rutherford with any design change, you have to solve Charlestown's traffic issues first. that pedestrian, cycle, and local, regional, intra-community and first last mile solution to get to the MBTA stations. Until you solve that, you can't go forward. Please rethink this. It is desperate here. We can't handle any more traffic. We're getting over 7,000 more people moving into the Mark Hill Housing Project and another 5,000 probably living in the Flatley Project, not including the 8,000 people that will be working there. And we still have HUD with additional 7,000 to 8,000 more people. Where are these people coming from? How are they going to get here? How are we going to get in and out? You have to solve that. Forget effort for now. Solve us. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments at this time? Seeing none. Next item on the agenda is committee chairs reports. Are there any? Next up, Regional Transportation Advisory Council. Lynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have no updates at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the minutes of December 15th. Can I get a motion and a second from a member to approve the minutes? And please state your name for the record. Any motion? Tom Bent.
Mr. Chair, I'll make that motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Is there a second? Amira Patterson.
I will second that motion.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Are there any comments, changes, questions, or suggestions? Seeing none on the motion to approve the minutes as presented, please call the roll.
David Mahler,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Ally Clayman,
Ally Clayman, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Amira Patterson,
Mayor Patterson, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Bill Conroy,
Bill Conroy, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Heather Hamilton,
Heather Hamilton, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Austin Saganowitz,
Austin Saganowitz, yes.
Jennifer Constable,
Jennifer Constable, yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
I don't believe we've had other MPO members join the meeting, so I think that motion carries, Mr. Chair.
I have joined. This is Dennis.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dennis.
Okay,
Would you like to approve the minutes or not?
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a work scope for learning from roadway pricing experience. Seth Asante.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. My name is Seth Asante, and I will be presenting the work program for learning from roadway pricing experiences. Roadway pricing has been implemented through several methods for the primary goals of reducing congestion, greenhouse gas emissions, generating funds to maintain highway and public transportation infrastructure, and managing travel demand by encouraging drivers to shift their trips to alternative travel modes or travel on off-peak periods. While many roadway pricing projects have been successful in accomplishing their goals, others have not been implemented for a variety of reasons, including impacts on transportation equity populations, business activities, and privacy concerns. The objectives of this study are to identify the challenges, including barriers and opportunities that arise from implementing roadway pricing strategies, so that they may be considered if roadway pricing is implemented in the Boston region in the future. Also, the objectives are to identify the MPO goals for roadway pricing and how to incorporate roadway pricing into the MPO planning process. This study has 5 tasks. In task 1, staff will identify and select key roadway pricing projects. Staff will review roadway pricing projects and select as many as 5 projects for evaluation and interviews. The selection criteria will include geographical distribution of the projects, pricing style, stage of implementation, ownership and/or management style, and availability of stakeholders for interviews. In task 2, staff will interview key personnel of candidate roadway pricing projects. Questions to be asked during the interviews will be developed in advance by the interviewing team. Staff will seek information about several key areas, including planning, implementation, operations, and assessments. Example questions are in the work program. In task 3, staff will work with the MPO board to identify the MPO goals for roadway pricing. Staff will interview MPO board members and conduct a workshop to identify the MPO goals and objectives for roadway pricing in the Boston region, and determine how these objectives support the goals identified in the MPO long-range transportation plan. We will provide MPO board members with the results of task 1 and task 2 and other materials in advance of the workshop. In task 4, we will explore roadway pricing in the MPO planning process. Staff will review the information gathered from the interviews, workshops, to assess how roadway pricing can be incorporated into the MPO planning process. And in the final task, task 5, will involve documenting the study and presenting the results to the MPO board. This 3C funded work has a budget of $45,000 and it will take 8 months to complete. The study meets the MPO goals of capacity management and mobility, clean air and clean communities, and economic vitality. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Questions from the members? Jim Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is a great, important piece of work, very timely. A couple thoughts that I had. Is there a way to do as a kind of before task 1, a kind of MPO check-in or workshop, because that kind of help with kind of goal setting of the work, because that in turn could inform kind of the case studies you guys evaluate and unpack. So I guess that was one question. And the other one is, I think it would be important too to, with this work, kind of look at the economic and equity impacts of, you know, these examples elsewhere in the country or the world or whatever it is, to kind of have that element in there as to unpack that as well.
Thank you, Jim. I think I'll answer your second question first. We are now learning the roadway pricing experiences, and to go into the economic assessment, I think will be a difficult task. But in our interviews with those who have implemented roadway pricing before, we will be asking questions about economic activities to be able to have some input on this. And does that answer your second question?
Yeah, so it sounds like in your research of your case studies that you'll be doing, you can kind of see what economic or equity impact analyses were done in those
Yeah,
examples. So that, yeah, I think that's understandable. Yeah, that would work.
yeah, and that is tax 2.
Yep.
Also, with your first question, I think you are talking about tax 3 where we involve the MPO board.
Correct.
Yeah.
So my question is, could we also have kind of as a task 1, a check-in too, kind of to help, check in with the board members and kind of help set, goals for the work. And then maybe there's also another check-in after tasks 1 and 2, I guess was my question. That could be an option.
Okay, yeah, I think we could do that.
Great. Okay, thanks. And I think also we could help identify, contacts and people to interview and all that good stuff, I guess.
Yeah.
So hopefully it could also help the work, not just frame it and inform it, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jim.
Ally Clayman.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, also in task 2, well, I thought the work scope looked really good. I'm also excited for this. And in task 2, I was wondering if MPO staff was thinking about trying to also understand how different case studies have used the revenue from roadway pricing.
Yeah, Ali, yes, this will be in tax 2. There have been several roadway pricing projects around the country, and distribution of funds to support different transportation projects and also transportation equity population will be addressed as part of our interviews with interviewing people who have implemented the roadway pricing before. So that will be taken care in tax 2.
Lynn Diggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to acknowledge that a study like this has been a long time coming, and I just want to express my appreciation to staff for helping us to get to this point. They've really listened to the requests made of various people in the UPWP committee, and also residents, members of the public, to help us get to a study like this. I think it's a great first step. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, can we get a motion and a second to approve this presentation as presented with the comments made from Jim Fitzgerald about doing some earlier work on MPO thoughts on this process? Lynn Diggins.
I'd like to make the motion to approve this work scope with Jim Fitzgerald's excellent recommendations.
Thank you, Jim Fitzgerald.
Thank you. I'll second that motion.
Motion having been made and seconded. Jonathan, please call the roll.
David Muller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Ally Clayman,
Ally Clayman, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Amira Patterson,
Amira Patterson, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Bill Conroy,
Bill Conroy, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Heather Hamilton,
Heather Hamilton, yes.
Tom Bent,
John Bent, yes.
Austin Saganowitz,
Austin Scanowitz, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Jennifer Constable,
Jennifer Constable, yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the certification review update. And I believe this is our friends from Federal Highway and Federal Transit.
Yes, good morning. My name is Cassie Ostrander again from Federal Highway, and I'm joined by my colleague Leah Sermon from FTA. And we will be presenting the findings from our 2020 federal certification review. Next slide, please. So just wanted to provide a reminder of the overview of what a certification review entails. The purpose of a certification review is to ensure that the metropolitan planning process is being carried out in accordance with applicable provisions of federal law. And it's not just a review of the MPO, rather it's a review of the planning process conducted by all of the agencies, MassDOT, the MPO, and regional transit providers who are charged with cooperatively carrying out the process on a daily basis. The certification review really provides us a valuable opportunity to enhance the planning process and improve the quality of transportation investment decisions. And likewise, I think the MPO gets a lot from our certification reviews. Federal Highway and FTA were required to conduct a certification review every 4 years for areas that are defined as that are within a transportation management area, defined as an urban area with a population over 200,000. And we're required to jointly certify the metropolitan transportation planning process. Next slide, please. So the components of a certification review, there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. In general, certification reviews build on and reflect ongoing activities, look at review of planning documents and activities like UPWP approvals, air quality conformity determinations, congestion management process, a lot of the 3C documents you have in place and their processes. The certification review also includes a desk review of planning products. So we usually send a request to MPO staff for certain documents you may not be privy to, or just to make sure we have the latest versions of recent updates, and includes a site visit, which incorporates public input. So for the certification review that we conducted for the Boston region, we had our on-site review September 28th and 29th. It was in person and it did have a virtual component, so kind of hybrid. And then we also had 2 public comment sessions in September and October of 22. So after all of that comes it kind of all culminates in a report that Federal Highway and Federal Transit put together that summarizes the review and offers findings. Our report was issued in December 20th, 2022. So upon completion of our review and evaluation and in our report, there are 3 different kind of outcomes that can be made. The first is to certify that the transportation planning process meets the requirements. The second is to certify that the transportation planning process substantially meets the federal requirements, but with conditions tied to corrective actions that need to be resolved with an action plan. The third is certifying the transportation planning process with conditions and project funding restrictions. And the last is just not certifying the planning process at all. That is a rare occurrence. So the findings in our 2022 certification review concluded with a conditional certification. Next slide, please. So we did have 1 corrective action, as I mentioned. The Federal Highway and FTA review team found in the MPO organizational structure section, and this finding was related to the annual listing of obligated projects. The MOU that the MPO has, it does include some provisions on the sharing of information for financial planning purposes, but it doesn't specifically address the development of the annual listing of obligated projects. So we did tie that to a regulation and said that this must be documented in the MOU. So whenever we have corrective actions, we also issue a timeline for when the corrective action needs to be resolved. So for this, we gave until September 30th, 2023. Next slide, please. So commendations. So commendations are noteworthy practices that are occurring in the region. And we do like to recognize these from time to time. For this certification review, we did have a finding for public outreach and involvement, and the process that led to publication of the updated public engagement plan and the guidebook. We did find that was really noteworthy. You're doing a lot of great work here, and we did want to make sure it was included in the report. So again, there are yes, thank you for moving on to the next slide. I'm going to turn it over to Leah here. So Leah's going to talk about some of the recommendations that we found throughout our certification review.
Thank you, Cassie. So recommendations are really suggestions that we provide, areas that we think that the processes and planning products can be improved. We've identified things that already meet the minimum federal requirements, but we have these suggestions that we think that will build off the existing good work and further enhance the process. So this morning, I'm just going to go over these in pretty high level, kind of chunked them by different topic areas. Encourage you to take a look at the report and view the full discussion of these different topics. We included a lot of information in that, but I'm going to try to keep it at a high level this morning. So the first topic is the MPO organizational structure, as well as the broader regional coordination. Related to the 2011 MOU, we recommend that it be updated. We think there's opportunity for some useful revisions, that it could be rewritten in a way that would sufficiently cover the minimum required provisions, but would allow for the details and nuances to be documented elsewhere, either in bylaws or in the operations plan, which would allow for those to be updated on a more regular basis and keeping up with changing practices and processes with the MPO, such as virtual meetings, for instance. We also recommend that an update to the MOU would allow for the MPO to formally establish how the interests of the RTAs are represented within the MPO policy board and the decision-making process. And that 2011 MOU also has currently a provision for annual review of the document by the MPO. And so we would recommend that the MPO follow that update, a review cycle, or if during the update you adopt a new review cycle, that you would follow whatever that cycle would be. In terms of coordination at the larger level, the Boston UZA includes around 11 different MPOs. And so we recommend that the MPOs identify a regular schedule, at least once a year, for regional coordination meeting amongst the MPOs. Current practice or past practice really has been sort of looking at the northern area and the southern area. But again, that's a really important practice, and we would like to see that continued and made a regular thing. It allows the MPOs to share current trends and other developments, look at particular projects and other planning efforts that have a greater impact on the overall region. Next slide, please. Regarding the tip and project selection, we had a few recommendations, a couple related to the target funds. We recommend that the MPO look for opportunities to identify and advance additional locally and regionally developed projects. Ways that you might find some additional projects would be looking at completed MPO studies, conducting some regional modal planning and gap analyses, utilizing the congestion management process, as well as leveraging additional available MassDOT information. We also recommended that the MPO look for kind of innovative ways to use the funds. For instance, providing the funds for project development activities for municipalities. We're also exploring options in partnership with the state for things like carrying over unprogrammed balances to future years. And given the importance of the project selection process, one thing we heard during our review was that sometimes the board is asked to make decisions on a very short time frame to fill in gaps or adjust as things are moving. So we recommend that the MPO look at establishing some sort of time frame by which Information would be shared with the board prior to an MPO meeting or prior to an action going to a vote to ensure that everyone has time to fully evaluate the projects and other information that's provided and make good decisions about the investments. Next slide, please. In public outreach, involvement, and civil rights, again, had a number of recommendations. Cassie mentioned, we also had a commendation for the public outreach, really thought a lot of good things going on there. We do recommend, knowing that the switch to virtual and electronic communication has really been dominant in the last couple of years. We encourage MPO to continue to strengthen the non-virtual and non-electronic outreach processes to ensure that the program is really fully inclusive and accessible. When scheduling meetings and other engagements with the public, the MPO should consider the needs of its target audience, such things like work schedule, childcare needs, digital literacy. Again, we recommend that the MPO develop a formal process and document how the RTA's interests are represented on the policy board. On Title VI, we recommend that the MPO's webpage be updated to ensure that it always has the latest Title VI report available. That report provides an accurate reflection of the organization's goals and accomplishments, so we want to make sure that's available for the public. And then pertaining to populations with limited English proficiency, or LEP, we recommend that the MPO assess its approach to LEP as we have the new 2020 census data becoming available to ensure that the current approach is continuing to meet the needs of populations with limited English proficiency. Next slide. So switching to non-motorized planning as well as environmental mitigation and consultation. And non-motorized planning, we recommend that the MPO consider updating or developing new regional bicycle or pedestrian plans, that those could complement the statewide bike and ped plans, and then focus more specifically on the needs and goals of the Boston region. Given the priority that the MPO places on bike and pedestrian investments, this could be really useful for guiding decision-making. For environmental consultation, we recommended that the MPO explore ways to engage specifically with federal and state environmental resource agencies, and that this targeted outreach be both during the MTP update effort that's ongoing, as well as looking for ways to incorporate the input of those resource agencies into the planning process on a regular basis. Next slide. And our final set of recommendations fell under the performance-based planning and programming category. First, we noted the MPO's interactive performance dashboard on its website. Thought that's a really useful tool. So we recommend to the MPO ensure it has the most up-to-date data as is available and be maintained on a regularly updated cycle. And we also recommend that that dashboard incorporate all of the federally required performance measures. And finally, we noted the MPO's tip before and after studies. They're really great efforts to look at the effectiveness of the tip projects on performance goals. To date, those have been focused on the MPO's target projects. And so consequently, that's sort of a limited set of data that has been made available. So to better understand the full impact of the regional investments on performance within the system, we recommend that the MPO work with the state and with the transit agencies to look for ways to evaluate the state-sponsored and transit projects within the region. And next slide, thank you. Cassie?
Yeah, thanks, Leah. So again, Federal Highway and FTA conditionally certified the transportation planning process for the Boston Region MPO. We issued our final report on December 20th, and the corrective action for the MPO organizational structure in relation to the list of obligated projects must be completed by September 30th, 2023. So once the corrective action has been resolved and accepted by Federal Highway and FTA, we'll send a letter certifying the planning process of the Boston Region MPO. And then we won't see you for 4 years for the certification review. So after that, the certification will remain in effect for 4 years. So December 20th, 2026 is when we need to conduct our next certification review. So another aspect of this is the development of an action plan. We'll be working with the MPO to develop an action plan. We've put together a template and shared it with the staff, and a draft of that, which will outline the responses to the findings, is due Friday, February 10th. So we will again be working on that. We'll share the action plan with you. And I do believe, Tegan, I think you confirmed that you could share the final report with everyone. So I do believe that has been made available to you. So take a look at that and let us know if you have any questions, but just want to again say thank you to the MPO staff for working with us on this process and for all of everyone's hard work.
Thank you, Leah and Cassie. Any questions from the members? And then Diggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of comments and a question. So, I really appreciate the comment about making materials available before meetings. The MPO generally does a very good job of presenting giving us the hardcore documents. But I was having a conversation with Ms. Jordan in preparation for our next advisory council meeting about how it would sometimes be helpful for us to get these kinds of presentations. The slide decks ahead of time. You need to understand what the emphasis is going to be, during that presentation, so that, as I told her, I can answer a lot of my questions in advance, if I know what's coming. So it's not like you're going to get more questions from me. Actually, you'll probably get fewer, and certainly the ones you get might be a little bit better. And so this isn't a veiled ad hominem. But for instance, was this presentation available before this morning? It could have been given to us in advance of this meeting. That's to one of the presenters.
Yeah, I don't believe we did just share this with CTPS yesterday. And I don't know if it was uploaded onto the list of available documents for the meeting. I don't know if Jonathan, you could confirm that.
No, it wasn't. I don't see it there. I was just wondering to what extent it was made available. So I'm sorry to step on you, John. I just want to be a little quick. I understand that the reason that a lot of times we don't get these presentations in advance is because people are working on them up until the last minute. Trust me, I get that. I think the way to work around that, though, is that you just advance the deadline, to earlier. And so it's a little bit of a phase shift, but you just have the deadline earlier, and and then it's distributed, much like we have to get the announcements of the meetings out 48 hours in advance of the meeting in order to adhere to OML. So just two quick questions that you can answer quickly if you want. Any evidence that the heavy use of virtual is inhibiting access to meetings? I know you said we need to make sure that we provide other means, but is there any evidence that the heavy use of virtual is inhibiting?
I would offer one example. We did receive a comment from a member of the public for our certification review, who was unaware that the certification review was in process because she does not use email. She does not, use a computer. So she had heard about it through word of mouth. So I think there is definitely opportunity to make sure we're not leaving gaps. I think we were just kind of fortunate that she did get word and was able to provide us comments, but I think there is potentially gaps.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. And finally, my little curiosity question. So you said that no certification was rare. How frequent is the fully certified? How frequently are MPOs fully certified?
Oh gosh, I can say I have Massachusetts experience. I think most often the conditional certification is what we do here. I have not ever fully certified an MPO since I've been here. Leah, you have experience outside of Massachusetts that I'm sure you could share.
Yeah, I apologize. I certainly don't have the statistic. I wouldn't say that it's rare to be fully certified, but it is probably slightly more common to have at least one corrective action.
All right, so no reason for us to feel that inadequate. Thank you.
No.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Lynn. Any other questions or comments from members? Megan?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I would welcome members speaking first, but I just also wanted to add to the discussion and thank Leah and Cassie, not just for this presentation, but also, for their engagement in the whole process. I know, most board members weren't present, I think, on the onsite where we really had kind of the deeper discussions about the topics that then led to the recommendations and other items in the report. And I would say it's a really great opportunity for us to work with our federal partners to really dig into the planning process, the best practices, the successes, and the improvements that we can make together. And so I just, again, want to emphasize that I think the report is incredibly valuable, and I hope that everybody has a chance to really read it and understand what's in there, because we do also have to work together, staff and board members, to implement the recommendations. Some may be very technical and very staff focused, but others are more policy or decision focused that the board will need to engage in. So just wanted to say that I'm looking forward to working together, and thank Leah and Cassie again for all of your work on producing this report.
Thank you, Megan. Any other comments or questions at this time? Seeing none. Thank you, Cassie. Thank you, Leah. Next item on the agenda is a summary of the FY22 public engagement activities. Stella Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all. Yeah, I'm here today to talk about the public engagement program. I also want to thank our federal partners for recognizing our work in public engagement over the past few years. And today I'm here to talk specifically about the public engagement work we've been doing just over the past year. So federal fiscal year 2022. So if we go to the next slide, thank you. Starting in federal fiscal year 2022, the Public Engagement Plan, or PEP, made a commitment to documenting the engagement activities conducted over the past federal fiscal year in order to assess the effectiveness of our efforts. We've prepared a memo to describe those activities, which has been posted to the MPO calendar for your review. And today I'm just going to provide an overview, talk about some of the ways we evaluate the effectiveness of our engagement work, and then highlight a few of our goal areas for the next federal fiscal years. So a new communications and engagement team was created in January of 2022, which includes myself, the Public Engagement Program Manager, as well as a communications coordinator and a manager of communications and engagement. Within this team, we've been able to strategize more about engagement, especially when it comes to how we evaluate our effectiveness and how we adjust our methods accordingly. So if we could go to the next slide, I want to briefly define the engagement program and mention the types of stakeholders that we engage. The public engagement program, guided by the PEP, facilitates inclusive public engagement and transparency in the MPO's planning and decision-making process by providing early and continuous public involvement opportunities and building relationships throughout our region to ensure that everyone, especially folks who have been underrepresented in transportation planning and disproportionately impacted by planning outcomes, has the opportunity to participate. So we engage a wide range of stakeholders. Beyond the board, municipal and agency stakeholders are traditionally the most connected to the MPO's work and are put in the closest circles here in this graphic. Advocacy and community organizations and then the general public are a bit further removed. So they require varied strategies and more time and effort in order to successfully engage. Next slide, please. Every year, we support the development of the TIP and UPWP by seeking public input at key points in the decision-making process, as shown in this graphic. Alongside TIP and UPWP development, if we move on to the next slide. In federal fiscal year 2022, we also supported the development of Destination 2050, our next LRTP. We engaged stakeholders in multiple studies, supported and collaborated with the Regional Transportation Advisory Council and the Transit Working Group, and we worked on building and expanding relationships with stakeholders, especially advocacy and community groups. Next slide, please. We use a variety of tools to support our engagement efforts. These support both direct communications and feedback collection, and also the monitoring and evaluation of who we're reaching and how. Go to the next slide. I just want to highlight that Twitter is our most popular social media tool. In federal fiscal year 2022, we posted 168 tweets to the @Boston Region MPO Twitter account. These received a total of 73,184 impressions. And our most widely seen tweets were about large MPO-funded projects and transportation studies. Next slide, please. Facebook is another popular platform for sharing information, particularly about engagement opportunities. And other platforms we use like LinkedIn also help us network and build relationships with stakeholders. We also post recordings of public events to the MPO YouTube channel, where we received a total of 3,046 views on all federal fiscal year 2022 recordings. We track engagement metrics on all of these platforms, and they help us, shape our communication strategies accordingly. Next slide, please. Another really important tool is surveys, which we build and publish in Qualtrics. All MPO public surveys include a set of optional demographic questions, which help us track and evaluate the distribution of responses and respond to gaps in engagement. We're also able to visualize response data in a variety of ways, like these examples here, which really helps with ongoing engagement efforts. So during federal fiscal year 2022, we deployed 3 public surveys, which I'll talk more about in a few minutes, and we received a total of 1,373 individual responses. Next slide, please. So I'll briefly provide some more specifics about our engagement activities for the programs and projects that we support. Starting with the TIP, during federal fiscal year 2022, we engaged stakeholders in the development of federal fiscal year 2023 to 27 TIP, working with the TIP manager to organize and host a series of public meetings and events, solicit feedback, and track and respond to public comments, which, including petition signatories, totaled 1,292. We also supported engagement on 8 amendments to the federal fiscal year 2022 to 26 TIP by publicizing comment periods and tracking and responding to comments. Next slide, please. And similar to the TIP, we engaged stakeholders in the development of the federal fiscal year 2023 UPWP by working with the UPWP manager to organize and host public events, solicit feedback, and track and respond to comments. We also supported engagement on 2 amendments to the federal fiscal year 2022 UPWP by publicizing comment periods. Next slide, please. And for the development of the MPO's next long-range transportation plan, Destination 2050, during federal fiscal year 2022, we collected information about transportation needs during sub-regional meetings, which I'll discuss more in a moment, and from other stakeholder meetings and engagement activities. We also supported the tracking and organization of feedback collected across programs and projects, which is tagged by theme and by representation of equity communities and interests. Next slide, please. We also engaged stakeholders in multiple federal fiscal year 2022 UPWP funded studies. You have heard detailed presentations on these studies in the past few months, but I'll just briefly mention some engagement related highlights. So if we go to the next slide, first for the Blue Hills study, which was actually proposed to us by a group of advocates and led by the communications and engagement team. We worked with a stakeholder advisory group, and they directed the work during the study, and we prepared an interactive story map tool, which is an engagement product for us as well as a tool for stakeholders. Next slide, please. And also the Transportation Inequities study is another study that came about in part due to stakeholder feedback. And the metrics chosen for analysis, as well as the various study products, were shaped by input we received during conversations with stakeholders. Next slide, please. We also supported 3-quarter intersection studies by conducting public surveys. As I mentioned, we used demographic data as well to determine the most prevalent non-English languages spoken in each study area. and provided survey translations in those languages. And we have some visualizations here and in the memo about the responses from different languages. Next slide, please. So in federal fiscal year 2022, we formally integrated the advisory council into the public engagement program, providing administrative support, facilitating coordination with staff and opportunities to engage with core MPO programs, and coordinating more closely on engagement initiatives and strategizing. There were 13 advisory council meetings during federal fiscal year 2022. Recordings of these meetings are posted to the MPO's YouTube channel, where we received a total of 248 views. Next slide, please. At least yearly, we meet with all of the sub-regional groups, which are coordinated by MAPC. Staff use these meetings to collect feedback for the LRTP needs assessment, which is an important part of the federal fiscal year 2022 meetings, and also share information about TIP and UPWC development. These meetings usually span 2 federal fiscal years. So in federal fiscal year 2022, we met with 5 of the sub-regional groups, and we also met with several other regional coordination groups to share information about MPO programs and collect feedback. Engagement staff also facilitate a separate ICC transportation group, that's the Inner Core Committee, which meets quarterly and provides a forum for coordination and collaboration for inner core transportation folks specifically. Next slide, please. We also provided engagement support to the Transit Working Group, which holds quarterly meetings to facilitate collaboration among transit providers and professionals, as well as coffee chats on various topics throughout the year. Staff held a total of 18 Transit Working Group meetings during federal fiscal year 2022. Next slide, please. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, a key focus for the engagement program is building and strengthening our relationships with stakeholders, in particular advocacy and community organizations. So during federal fiscal year 2022, we held over 26 one-on-one and small group meetings. We also attended many events held by these types of organizations. We also maintain internal databases to track contacts, meetings, events, and just various ways that people engage with the MPO. So we look forward to continuing to develop and expand these tools alongside our relationships in the coming year. Next slide, please. And that brings me to our goals for federal fiscal year 2023. You can see these outlined in more detail in the memo, but at a high level, we want to continue addressing the gaps in our engagement, especially in reaching a broader public audience, including communities with limited English proficiency. To return to the stakeholder types graphic that I showed at the beginning, we really want to keep pushing our focus outwards and prioritize engaging the groups that are furthest removed from our planning process, essentially kind of bringing those outer groups in. We want to keep expanding our relationships with these types of stakeholders, deploy a variety of engagement methods to reach different audiences, improve our tracking and evaluation, and continue to invest in staff capacity and resources to ensure that we're able to meet these goals and continue to expand the reach and effectiveness of the engagement program. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Stella. Questions from the members? Or comments? Seeing none, Stella, I will just say excellent work this year. As Federal Highway and Federal Transit noted, it's very impressive how far we've come. As you've noted, that doesn't mean we don't have a long way to go, but we're certainly tracking in the right direction, and you guys have done a really great job this year.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a review of the long-range transportation plan project programming policies. Michelle Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. I'm Michelle Scott. I'm the manager of the long-range transportation plan, and I'll be doing a refresher today on some policies related to programming projects in the LRTP. Erin, could you skip ahead 2 slides, please? Thank you. So the highlights for today's presentation, just as a refresher, I know a number of members were involved in these conversations, but I believe we have some new folks since then. Back in October 2020, following the completion of Destination 2040, our current plan, the MPO adopted a series of policies related to including projects in our long-range transportation plan. And one of the things I'd like to do today is kind of do a refresher with you all about what these policies are before we move later into the winter and spring. We'll be talking about the LRTP project universe and supporting your work to select some projects for the LRTP. So I'm going to be focusing most specifically today on a policy specific to what projects are included in the LRTP. This is a policy that we've been applying over the past couple months to start to develop a project universe. And through that process, one of the experiences that we had is that we found that we were kind of bringing in some additional information, from federal statutes and guidance and conversations with MassDOT staff that we thought might be good to reflect in that policy. So you'd have a better idea of how we were going through the process of putting together the universe of projects to be included in the LRTP. So one of the things I'll be talking about today are some clarifications to that policy that in particular expand details about process and about some, exceptions to certain definitions. I'll also touch on, additional policies that were included in this package back from 2020 that'll influence the development of Destination 2050. To support today's discussion, there is a memo posted on the MPO meeting calendar. Basically, that document includes a short cover statement that explains some of the updates that have been made to the policy, and you can see the actual updates kind of in red line track changes style within the document itself. Next slide, please. So what I'm hoping that we'll do today is kind of review some of these policies and some of the additional content that we've added to the policy document. Go over any questions you have. If you're comfortable with this, we'll post an updated version of the policy document to the MPO website and continue to apply that as we move into the stages of Destination 2050. Next slide, please. So just to kind of come back quickly to our Destination 2050 activity sheet, you've seen this in a couple of presentations I've given recently that highlight the different development areas of producing our long-range plan. Today, we're kind of focusing on the middle two related to strategies and funding allocation, as these policies connect closely to those activities that you'll be working on later this winter and spring. Next slide, please. So the policy package from the summer and fall of 2020 that I referenced earlier kind of touched on policies in 4 different areas, and they're the ones highlighted in the diagram on the slide. They include the criteria for projects that are included in our major infrastructure program. This is one of 6 investment programs that the MPO has established under Destination 2040, our current plan. It focuses both specifically on kind of large scale projects with really regional impact. The second, which is the box highlighted in orange, are the criteria for projects that are specifically listed in the LRTP. As I'll get a little bit more into later in the discussion, these are distinct from, in some ways, from the projects that are included in our major infrastructure program. These discussions back in 2020 also yielded some decisions about scoring policies, for LRTP projects, as well as policies for when projects are programmed in the LRTP and what kind of processes the MPO will follow leading up to including projects in the LRTP. Next slide, please. So again, the focus that I want to put on mainly today is just kind of the clarifying the changes around projects that are included in the LRTP based on these new policies. So these discussions back in 2020, really led to the outcome of limiting projects that are listed in the LRTP to those that are federally required to be there. And as you may recall from those conversations, up until, affirming that decision, there was dialogue around the right time to make decisions about funding large projects through the MPO's investment process. And ultimately, the decision was made that it's kind of really most appropriate to focus those decisions on our capital investment arm, which is specifically the transportation improvement program. This is kind of in line with a trajectory that I would say the MPO has been on for some time, where the LRTP is becoming, more of a higher level policy document while still, fulfilling its federal requirements specific to projects, but really the capital decisions are being focused more on the tip. So to talk about kind of the before and after in terms of changes to this policy for including projects in the LRTP, you can see a comparison in the diagram towards the bottom part of the slide. For Destination 2040, prior to when we were talking about these policies in 2020, the LRTP includes all projects that change the capacity of the transportation network and any projects that cost more than $20 million. And these are, response to federal rules and guidance. And at that time, when we were developing Destination 2040 and plans prior, there had been guidance around having a cost threshold for including projects in the LRTP. Since Destination 2040, we got a further guidance that there is no longer that cost threshold component for including projects in the LRTP. And that was something folded into those 2020 discussions. And the policy that came out of those was that the LRTP would include what are termed regionally significant projects. And I'll talk more about that definition in a minute, as well as any projects that are required to be under in the LRTP because they are under National Environmental Policy Act or NEPA review. And again, going forward, there is no cost threshold for specifically including projects in the LRTP. Next slide, please. So just as a reminder of the definition of regionally significant projects, and this is something that we've worked to clarify and expand upon in the red lines to that memo document that I shared. This definition comes from the US DOT and FHWA, and it is tied closely to air quality regulations. And basically part of the intent is to make sure that our plan is in, air quality in conformity with air quality standards and rules, with the goal of, not having federal investments worsen air pollution in different parts of the country. So the regionally significant projects definition kind of includes two major components. One is related to what facilities that projects are located on and what those projects do. So the definition for regionally significant projects, includes at a minimum, and focuses on facilities that serve regional transportation needs. At a minimum, these include all interstate and principal arterial highways. They include fixed guideway transit systems that provide an alternative to regional highway travel. And they generally reflect the types of facilities and projects that would be included in a regional travel demand model. In terms of what these projects do, this is really focused on projects that would impact air quality by adding or removing system capacity. And as noted on the slide there, one of the things that federal regulations also do is define some exceptions, to the regionally significant projects definition. And one of the things that we've done in our policy document is kind of expand the list of those for our reference as we're applying these guidelines to selecting projects for the LRTP project universe. Next slide, please. So one thing that's kind of important to remember is that, there's no longer direct overlap between projects that are in our major infrastructure program and projects that are included in the LRTP. And this basically means that, we have projects that may, meet the criteria for the major infrastructure program, but we may not need to specifically list them in the LRTP. Vice versa, we may have projects that, don't rise to the level of being included in the major infrastructure program from a cost standpoint, let's say, but may have other features that require us to include them in the LRTP. And that table towards the bottom of the slide kind of, clarifies some of those distinctions. Both, the LRTP and the major infrastructure program are really focused on those interstate and principal arterial class of roadways, but the major infrastructure program also has some criteria related to the level of access control on those roadways, as well as the threshold for cost for including projects should they not meet some of those other criteria. So as we're going into those conversations, later in the spring about projects and how they fall within kind of the MPO's investment framework, this is the kinds of policies that are informing what goes where. Next slide, please. One other element that we wanted to clarify in this policy document was projects that are under National Environmental Policy Act review and how MPO staff will work with MassDOT and FHWA to identify and incorporate those. So basically the NEPA process is oriented towards analyzing the environmental impacts of federal actions, in this case, major transportation investments. And depending on where projects are located and what their characteristics are and what communities might be affected and other factors, projects go through varying levels of environmental review. And there are a number of processes in place for FHWA to work with MassDOT and others to kind of move those projects through that review process. And so, the policy document kind of clarifies how we'll work with MassDOT and FHWA in terms of ongoing collaboration and kind of focusing on projects that will require elevated or more extensive levels of review, either those that have kind of a conditional categorical exclusion from higher levels of review, or projects that may require an environmental assessment or environmental impact statement. Next slide, please. So again, just to highlight some of the items that I mentioned earlier, what we've done in that policy document and some of the red lines is to expand and provide more information about regionally significant projects and kind of exceptions. So you can see how we're making choices about what projects should be included in the LRTP universe, and also to clarify how we'll be working with our partners to include projects in the NEPA process. Next slide, please. I just want to quickly touch on a couple of other policies that were included in this package before we move into question and answer. Next slide, please. So one other thing that was included in this policy package was a focus on, restricting programming of specific projects in the LRTP to what we call the first 2 time bands, or first really 10 years of that LRTP period. So this diagram kind of shows the time bands that'll be included in Destination 2050, our next plan. We look at setting goal percentages and funding allocation to our investment programs throughout this planning horizon period. But in terms of selecting projects for the LRTP, these policies stipulate that we're going to focus those decisions on the first 2 time bands, the very first time band, of course, being the TIP that's developed at the same time as the LRTP, as well as the 5-year time band that follows after that. Next slide, please. Some of the other policies included in this package are noting that all projects that are in the LRTP will be rescored using TIP criteria when it's time to consider these projects for the TIP. This is part of giving the MPO, another opportunity to understand the implications of projects, their costs, their features, before making the decision to move them from the LRTP into the TIP. And also emphasizing that projects that are in the long range plan will be reviewed during each LRTP cycle. And we're going to be working with project proponents who have projects in Destination 2040, our current plan, to come before you all with information about their status and how the projects are moving forward. And if projects are not advancing, the MPO certainly has the prerogative to move them back into the LRTP universe for decisions for a future plan. Next slide, please. We just want to highlight a couple of other guidance factors that are going to affect our LRTP projects analysis and programming decisions. Projects that are included in the LRTP will need to be assessed for their impacts on greenhouse gas reduction per the Global Warming Solutions Act and related requirements. We also look at these projects through the perspective of a Title VI analysis performed in accordance with our disparate impact, disproportionate burden policy, and we'll also continue to work with MassDOT and federal agencies to ensure that we're complying with any air quality conformity information that's required for the LRTP. Next slide, please. So following today's presentation, we're going to continue to apply these policies to develop the universe, and we will be working with MassDOT districts and municipal project proponents to bring that information before you all. And again, these will guide our decisions about investment later in spring of 2023. Next slide, please. So again, I just wanted to take the opportunity for questions or any concerns about the clarifications we've made to the policy before we make any further updates. Thank you for attention, and I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Michelle. Questions for Michelle? Lynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Michelle, on your memo, page 6 of your memo, do you have easy access to that?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
I have it on my screen at least.
Yeah, I have it on my screen too, me. So looking at the red line portion, I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. It says, as noted in 40 CFR, the categories of exempt projects include, but are not limited to, the following. So those are projects that we can't consider putting in the LRTP.
Those are projects that may fall out of that, regionally significant projects definition. And, there are things that if a project is meeting those characteristics, we take a look at them and say, do we need to include this in the LRTP? That's really kind of the guide. We really want to be looking at what has to be in there. So if a project, falls in one of these exemptions, it may not be need to be included. And of course, when we reach the stage of programming the TIP, it'll be included there, but again, it's kind of frees us up to really focus those capital programming decisions, on the TIP, as opposed to having to put a lot of projects in the LRTP.
Okay, because I'm kind of hung up on the word excludes these projects. So they're not excluded. They're just, I don't know. I'm a little. I guess I'm just being dense this morning, but I'm a little confused. I'll think about it some more and maybe talk about it in the advisory council meeting.
It is tricky. It's definitely been a change for us to kind of, the cost threshold was kind of a very bright line tool that we could use. And this requires us to look more at the, characteristics of a project in terms of incorporating it in the LRTP. Of course, again, we can certainly talk about the kinds of projects and project demand that we're seeing in our different program areas, our investment programs, as part of the LRTP. But this just kind of clarifies where we may not need to take the extra step to include the project based on our regionally significant projects definition in our policy.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. That's it.
Other questions? Other questions or comments from the members? Allie Clayman.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Michelle. Sorry if you said this and I missed it, but I just wanted to clarify because in the memo, it talks about new transit connections. And I wasn't clear if that also includes additions in bus service or new bus connections to rapid transit.
My understanding is that the definition is really focused on that fixed guideway component. I think if we had cases of bus rapid transit, we'd probably, want to take a close look at the features of that project and make sure, see where it falls in comparison to that definition. But I think like for a really clear example of that, what that kind of project would be, like the Green Line extension is an example of that, like fixed guideway, connection and extension.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions or comments? Seeing and hearing none, Michelle, I think you can assume that is concurrence.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the parking policy and trip generation presentation by Rosemary McCarran.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. If we can move to the next slide. I'm Rosemary McCarran. I am the manager of our data analysis and applications group, and I'm here today to present the results of our parking policy and trip generation study, a unified planning work program study funded in federal fiscal year 2022. Next slide. So this research builds upon two local studies on parking and trip generation. The Metropolitan Area Planning Council's Perfect Fit Parking Study found an oversupply of residential parking in the Boston region's inner core. They also found that available parking supply was the largest predictor of parking demand, which suggests that parking availability influences car ownership. That research was followed up by CTPS's trip generation rate research, and that found that developments with constrained parking availability tend to have lower vehicle trip generation rates than developments that have ample parking. Taken together, these studies point to an opportunity to use parking policy to help reduce vehicle ownership and trip generation. As we know, vehicle travel is a substantial driver of greenhouse gas emissions, and a better understanding of this relationship between parking supply, vehicle ownership, and use can help inform parking policies that help Massachusetts achieve its aggressive greenhouse gas reduction goals. Next slide. So as an overview, the purpose of the research was to explore the relationship between parking supply, vehicle ownership, and driving. And the study objectives were to identify innovative parking policies to reduce auto ownership and use, and to inform ongoing trip generation and parking policy related research. Though the relationship between land use, the built environment, and travel behavior is well studied, the body of research on how parking policy affects people's decision to own or use a vehicle is pretty small. And one major reason for the limited literature is that there's a lack of systematic data collection on parking supply and parking utilization. So this section covers the main findings that we found from key research on the relationship between parking, vehicle ownership, and travel behavior. So in terms of residential parking, the literature demonstrates that access to private parking increases automobile ownership. The ratio of parking spaces provided per unit is actually a strong predictor of vehicle ownership and frequency of driving. And then additionally, when parking is bundled in to the housing cost, that also increases the likelihood of owning a vehicle. The literature also addresses on-street parking, and it demonstrates that uncrowded on-street parking increases the likelihood of someone owning a vehicle. However, when controlling for total parking supply, on-street parking has less of an influence on driving behavior than guaranteed private off-street parking at your residence. And finally, looking at commercial parking, one study demonstrated that limited parking influences mode choice for trips to grocery stores. This study looked at 6 grocery stores in walkable neighborhoods in Philadelphia and found that grocery stores with large service parking lots were more likely to generate driving trips than grocery stores that were more pedestrian oriented with no setbacks and limited parking. Another study showed this was from Washington State's commute trip reduction law. There's a statewide survey, and looking at the results of that survey indicated that pricing workplace parking or discounting parking for high occupancy vehicles reduces single occupancy vehicle trips to the workplace. Next slide. So in this section, I'm going to talk about what actions we can take based on that literature to create parking policy that minimizes vehicle ownership and single occupancy vehicle trips. So one opportunity is to evaluate parking policy frameworks to ensure that the approach to parking provision achieves our desired outcomes. The traditional framework for parking policy is the predict and provide approach, in which planners try to predict demand and ensure that everyone who wants to drive has parking. The multimodalism approach acknowledges that some travelers are auto dependent, but focuses on providing parking near commuter rail facilities and deprioritizes parking in urban and transit accessible areas. The demand management framework is kind of the opposite of predict and provide. It comes from the perspective that demand is potentially limitless for free and easy parking. And so parking policy should try to manage that demand. This framework is most effective when it's paired with investments that create safe and attractive alternatives to driving. The demand management approach to parking provision may be an appropriate framework in Boston's inner core subregion, where walking, bicycling, and/or transit are viable transportation options. The multimodalism approach may be more appropriate in some of the outer suburban areas or areas with access to commuter rail. One important thing to note is that regional coordination is really necessary to ensure successful parking policy. Free and easy parking in one municipality might undermine another municipality's attempt to manage travel behavior through parking policy. Next slide. So another opportunity for influencing parking policy is leveraging transportation impact analyses. So the first suggestion is to include parking supply as an analysis factor. The literature demonstrated that there is a relationship between parking supply and trip generation, and that constrained parking supply typically reduces trip generation, but that at this point is not really factored into transportation impact analyses. So trying to think more cohesively about that parking supply and how it carries forward into the transportation impact analysis. Typically, that analysis goes in the other direction and uses trip generation rates to estimate parking supply. Another way we could leverage these analyses is to require some quantification of on and off street parking supply. Some municipalities already use this approach, and it helps the municipality build out an inventory of parking supply that can be used to further understand these issues. For larger developments that are required to provide monitoring of the travel behavior at the site, parking utilization data should be included. And in addition, if possible, require occupant surveys, which can help quantify some spillover effects, some on-street parking behavior, to help understand in full where people are parking. Next slide. So some additional opportunities that don't fit into any of these buckets are to add off-street parking supply to assessor data. Again, this just helps build up a parking inventory to help us understand how much parking supply there is. Require developments to allocate some parking space for shared vehicles or pickup or drop-off zones. Reducing the amount of space dedicated to single occupancy vehicles can help reduce those single occupancy vehicle trips. And again, unbundling parking, removing the cost of parking from the cost of housing, it discourages vehicle ownership. Next slide. Okay. So to conclude, I'm going to summarize the key findings. Parking availability influences vehicle ownership and use. The more parking provided, the more likely people are to own and use their vehicle. Insufficient data on parking supply has limited the academic research, but municipalities can adopt policies that will help us fill this data gap. So some potential next steps to build on this research is to, one, gather on-street parking data. We could combine this with prior parking research. For instance, MAPC's Perfect Fit Parking Study, some of the sites have on-street parking available to them as well. And so we could add that additional on-street parking supply to get a more fine-grained understanding of the parking utilization. We could also incorporate on-street parking supply into future research, including a forthcoming UPWP funded study on lab and municipal parking. And the additional opportunity is household travel surveys. Those typically provide robust information about how people travel, but don't capture information about parking pricing or availability. So those types of questions could either be added to the household travel survey, or a supplemental survey could be administered to a subset of respondents to understand how that parking cost and availability influences how they travel. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Rose. And Jay Monty already has his hand up. Jay?
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Rose. This ongoing work that you guys have been doing on parking has really been invaluable to us. It has really enabled us to make some pretty major changes to our parking regulations as well as our zoning regulations with regard to parking. So thank you and keep it up. This is really good stuff. One thing I'll just point out, and you're talking about next steps and potential things to look at. So we have a lot of apartment buildings in Everett that are like pre-war 1910 to 1940 built, 20 unit brick buildings that were built entirely without parking, where they have very, little parking. And then street parking is also very tight. So one of the things we used to look at, we sort of took the next step with this recently, was looking at vehicle registrations in the city to these buildings. Because, while the work you did with, on-site parking is great, it doesn't always tell us what's happening with these sites that already don't have parking. And so what we were able to do is look at vehicle registrations, look at the property deeds, figure out how many units these buildings had, and develop a vehicle registration per unit metric. And it largely reflected what we already knew and what you were already saying, which is that when parking is extremely limited, vehicle registration is also lower as well. And we found about a 30% elasticity between buildings that had no parking on site and limited street parking. Their rate of vehicle registration was about 30% lower than buildings that had on-site parking. So it does mirror what you've already done, but it's another metric I think that was helpful for us and might be helpful for you in next steps too.
Yeah, I really appreciate that feedback. I think that's a great approach. And as as mentioned, there's limited data on the parking supply. And so understanding that auto ownership by site is an interesting approach. So thanks for sharing that.
David Gozes.
So thank you for putting this memo together. I know it was part of a small study, and it got me to think about to what extent do our policies that try to reduce the use of cars or even purchase of cars, how much is it being undermined really by other factors, right? People think about all sorts of things when they decide to buy a car or to use the car that they already have, and some of the factors are captured in the memo, I think. Like the convenience of parking on your street or where you're going. For me, when I lived in South Boston, of course, it was hard to find a parking space, right? So I tried to avoid using my car, just like a lot of people, whenever I could. But I think more and more there's other factors that are causing congestion, even when people are driving less, right? Like you mentioned the shared ride vehicles. In the inner core, you can get a shared ride, you can get an Uber or a Lyft to your house in a minute or two, almost all the time, right? To bring you wherever you want to go. And so you have all these cars just driving around and deliveries, right? You look right out the window and you see more and more deliveries all the time, delivering everything you need, right? So it's like much less need to take your car to all kinds of places when everything can just be brought to you. So I just wonder, how much congestion actually changes when people stop using their car to go places, but at the same time, more cars are coming to you. So what's that relationship, right? I think it might be interesting to compare how these policies that are trying to reduce car ownership compares to just other policies or technologies out there that are causing more and more congestion. And so I don't know, maybe there's some sort of opportunity for a follow-up study or to include that question in some way as a next step. But yeah, so that's what I was thinking, but good job so far. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for that suggestion. I know, there's a lot of opportunities and technologies that make it easier for you to not take and own your own vehicle. And I think there's some research on whether people are really, foregoing car ownership before or due to these technologies, but I don't think there's much information then relating that to increase congestion. So that's a good approach for us to take a look at.
Lynn Higgins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You had mentioned on one of your decks, on one of your slides, that when you control for street parking, I guess the number of spots available, I forget what exactly you control for, but that it was the availability, guaranteed availability of on-street parking that was the biggest determinant of whether people own the car or use the car.
Owned a car, yeah.
Okay, own the car. Okay, and of the studies that were listed in the memo, did that come from one of those?
Yes, that came from, let me pull up the exact study. It came from the guaranteed parking, guaranteed driving study.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, that compared to neighborhoods in New York that both essentially had the same amount of parking supply, but one neighborhood had much more on-street parking and one neighborhood had much more off-street parking. And so those with off-street parking tied to their residences were more likely to drive than those who only had access to on-street parking.
Gotcha. And can you help me maybe do some little research on the impact of the discouragement of car ownership? Because what I'm trying to get at is because look, I support the whole thing. I support like reduced car ownership and more increase in transit, but I do have to think about the impact on the people who are discouraged from owning cars if the ownership of those cars would make things better for them. An example is like if the place of employment is far away, and that place of employment gives you a higher income potentially, but the only way you can get there because of the nature of the transit system is to have a car. Now, if you can't have a car, then you have to forego that job. Then what's the impact for you on not having that job? So do you have a sense of, in your research, did you come across any kind of places where I might be able to do my own research and impact of that?
I can share some resources with you. There was a study that I'm thinking of that I read. It was actually, I believe it was might have been a master's student thesis from MIT. And one of the interesting things in that study, although it didn't make it into the memo, it didn't quite fit in here as well. But they looked at how people valued owning a car, and people just find immense value in owning a car, above and beyond what they're paying for it, just the convenience of having it there. And so one obstacle to discouraging driving is like really offsetting the way that people value their car. And so I thought that was interesting and somewhat related to what you're saying. I do know of some other resources. Evelyn Bloomberg is a researcher who does a lot of looking at economic opportunity and how vehicle travel relates to that. And there definitely have been some findings that having access to a car can increase your economic opportunity. And so, it's not that everyone needs to be discouraged from having a vehicle, and that's not the goal, but where it's feasible for people to not own one, we want to not create conditions where we're making it easier to own that vehicle, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and certainly we want to move towards a society where economic opportunity is everywhere, and that reduces the need, to travel far distances. Especially for lower income people or minorities, that may be disproportionately affected by policies that discourage car ownership. So okay, I hear you. Thank you.
Other comments from the members before I open it up to the public? Ellie Clayman.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. And thanks, Rose. I was really excited to see this on the agenda, and it actually brings me back to a lot of the work that I did in my previous role with the city of Somerville. And they are doing a ton on this. So if MPO staff is, looking for more information, it could be great to connect with the planners there in the mobility division. When I was there, I did a lot of development review, and they require developers to collect data on on-street parking, like you mentioned, and to do continued travel surveys of employees in commercial developments. And they have been somewhat successful asking developers in some areas, at very close proximity to rapid transit, to sort of back into an analysis by looking at different proposed ratios of parking supply in a commercial development and census data of travel to work characteristics and sort of what that would result in terms of parking garage utilization. I think a lot of the challenge seems to be that parking supply isn't linked to trip generation. So when I was there, we were asking developers to try and do that, but that approach still sort of felt like it wasn't really getting a full, picture of the impact of a proposed parking supply on trip generation. So I was also just wondering, I guess the question here is, it sounded like MPO staff did find some literature that links parking supply to trip generation rates. Is that?
Yeah, so I think we have some preliminary research. I think the trip generation study that CTPS published last year, and we could follow up and share that with you. That was comparing trip generation rates locally to ITE trip generation rates. And there was a finding that areas with more constrained parking supply had less trip generation. There's most of the literature reviewed for this was more specifically about car ownership. And there's some, there's definitely a relationship between ownership and use, and that's a little bit hard to tease apart. And so I didn't find any research that really gives us a strong basis for that analysis where we're taking parking supply and creating a trip generation rate from there. But I think that's sort of a key goal that we could build out with more data.
Yeah, and maybe that's something that can get worked in, because I think you guys are also doing a lab and municipal parking study. So yeah, I know we're excited to see the results of that, because that is definitely a challenge, just understanding or working in parking supply to really get at that impact of trip generation.
Great, thanks. I believe I'll be presenting that scope shortly to this MPO board, and we'll be plugging any of your thoughts, any of the board members or municipalities, any thoughts they may have on lab parking would be great. So stay tuned for that.
Any other questions or comments from the members? Seeing none, we have a member of the public who'd like to ask a question or make a comment. Dan, and please state your name again for the record.
Dan Jaffe, I'm a Charlestown resident. In our neck of the woods, we're very much addicted to our cars because we are limited on our ability to get to shopping centers to get food and other stuff. So it is a requirement at this point in time. We need to look at reducing that need to free up space on the street for bus systems, but also to be more ecology minded, to remove some of the CO and other nitrous oxide particulates that are in the air, just for our area, because we get a lot of it from both the Highway 93 puts out a lot, as well as the river itself with the heavy transit of ships. In fact, my windows, I often have to close in the summertime because it's so bad from the river, because they use bunker oil, which is really nasty stuff. But I think the point is that we are addicted to our cars, and we have to reduce that necessity by really focusing in on microtransit, using smaller bus systems that are more limited to their geographical space. In Charlestown, as an example, within the community, as well as getting to better faster transit solutions. In our case, the green line and the orange line are the two focal points that I'd like to see. And then we also need to think about, okay, how can you collect people at some central locality that can then get them to better shopping opportunities? So a hub for people to get to using the microtransit solution to then take a manned bus to a shopping center on a scheduled basis so that we reduce all transit in and out of the community and within the community. And that's really the focal point that you need to focus in on. That's why I know you don't like hearing it, but Charlestown is so dependent on its access in and out across a very limited pathway that we really need to work at that point first. And we have a solution. We know how to do it. We just can't get past square one. We need pathways that are isolated away from the car traffic. So to entice people to take these transit solutions, having a bus or a van that sits on the street with all the other traffic during the high points of high traffic isn't solving the problem. It's giving them a faster pathway, a more convenient pathway, a safer pathway, and a more pleasant pathway to get to other transit opportunities, whether it be inside the city core or over in Cambridge, as an example. And there are opportunities for us to do this. It's not a big leap. It's very small, in fact. It's price-wise, it's minuscule for all the stuff that you guys do. And if we can get that far, then I can see doing more for Everett. But until you do that, you can't do more for Everett. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the members? Seeing none. Thank you, Rose. Next item on the agenda is member items. Are there any? Seeing none, can I get a motion? Oh, Amira, do you have an item or you want to make a motion to adjourn?
I did have a quick item. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to note that the MBTA Advisory Board did attend the MMA this weekend, and I would like to say that it was a great success. It was great to put faces to some of our members. You know who you are. Hello. And just to say that we are excited to continue to be connecting, networking, and outreaching this year. So thank you.
Thank you, Amir. Any other member items at this time? Seeing none, remember we're meeting again next week, and can I get a motion and a second to adjourn? Please state your name for the record when making the motion. Amira Patterson.
Amira Patterson making the motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? Tom Bent.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Without objection, we are adjourned, and I'll see you all next week. Bye, everybody.